He's a philosopher, a counseling psychotherapist, a certified mindset coach, and of course, a certified NLP coach practitioner. None other than Mr. Byron Athene.
Thanks, Daniel. I'm really, really pleased to be here. Thanks for inviting me on your show.
Welcome, Mr. Byron on Entrepreneurship 101. And can you please introduce you more about yourself that I
Okay, so yeah, I'm also a clinical supervisor as well, as the website says. I'm also a trainer. I usually run courses on managing emotions because that's one of my specialties in the work that I do. My psychotherapy and my coaching are very emotions focused. So I have a training, half an hour training kind of course about how to manage your emotions.
Well, Mr. Byron, I think you're an author too, if you don't.
Oh
And
yeah,
as
a brand new
yes,
author.
a,
I've just had a book published.
a brand new author as
This
well.
book, find
Looking for
find your path to resilience.
awesome. Looking forward for a conversation, a book 101 review, as
Excellent.
well
Yeah,
as
thank you.
your hypnotherapist.
Yeah.
Thank you for being part on Entrepreneurship 101. Here we celebrate you. We salute you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, yeah, so today let's talk about being you as in all those hats, plus in terms of entrepreneurship mindset.
Yeah.
So, you said reality subjective. That's a radical statement for a therapist. Walk us through a clinical example where clients' subjective reality was causing the pain and how shifting subjectivity, not changing their circumstances, created healing.
Yeah. Well, it is. It's. I guess it does sound like a radical idea, but I think that's pretty much the main premise that quite a few therapists operate under. Because let's say we can split clients into two groups. The first group include clients who think the situation or their reality needs to be different for them to feel different. For them, therapy is not really going to work too well most of the time because it's not as if the therapist can change the person's reality. So the people in the second group, these include people who realize that their thoughts can um, that they can feel differently because they're thinking about their reality in a different way. So the fact that reality is subjective, if they didn't know that already, highlighting that idea is the best first step because we can't control the universal reality that we're in, but we do have 100% control over our subjective reality. So how the reality seems.
Well said, Mr. Byron.
Thanks.
And why do we exist? Your philosopher will actually answer that question. I'm not asking for the textbook answer, but if I'm asking you answer, the one that gets you out of bed on hard days.
Sure. Why do we exist? I think we exist to make the most of life as much as possible. And I don't mean that in terms of you need to have a purpose that drives you. I mean that in terms of we have been given tools to make. We are alchemists. We could have like a small bit of dirt, but because the power of the mind, we can make that small bit of dirt into like the best substance in the world almost. It's because it's all in the mind. So I think we exist to just make the most out of our experience as possible. That's what I believe.
It's all in the mind. Mr. Byron, what's my purpose? That's the question you're always ready to answer, but I suspect your answer is not find your passion. So, what is it? And why do most people look for purpose at exactly the wrong places?
Yeah, well, I think our purpose is whatever we think it is. There's no right or wrong in terms of purpose, and I think maybe certain people are maybe I don't know, led astray, or they might not be governing their minds or reality in the right way because they're not following their own purpose, they're following someone else's. It's like they've got like a legacy of a purpose as opposed to an individual one. So under those conditions, you still might thrive and enjoy yourself, but you might you might be able to find it easier to thrive and enjoy yourself more if your purpose was more aligned to you as opposed to the real author of it.
A legacy of purpose, indeed. And Mr. Byron, you've been interested in philosophy and psychology since 1991. What is
Yeah.
belief you held the years that you've since completely reversed, and what forced that change?
So, well, okay. So, 1991, I was like 20 years old. I was just like the average kid listening to music, doing whatever. But then I stumbled across the idea that happiness comes from within. And that was a real ground breaking, mind altering idea because I used to think that our emotions were reflections of what's happening. But I realized that actually, well, happiness comes from within. So then that made me realize that if happiness comes from within, surely unhappiness comes from within as well. So then that made me then question, so why do we make ourselves unhappy? And then I stumbled across this philosophical truth, and it was discovering this philosophical truth that got me into philosophy. I didn't even know what philosophy was at that point. I didn't know what psychology was. So when I found this truth, I thought, surely other people have found this as well. So that's what made me explore and investigate, and I realized that no one had, and that's the cornerstone of my um, counseling practice.
A cornerstone, indeed. You have a theory on the root of the negative emotion. Don't give us the whole thing, but give us the uncomfortable part. What is the piece of the theory that might someone defensive or resistant?
Okay, so it's called the genie lamp hypothesis, and it revolves around the idea that we have negative emotions as adults only because we needed to have negative sensations as babies because we were fragile and dependent. So when we were babies and there was something wrong, if one of our needs wasn't met, that would just feel bad. If we're too hot or too cold or in pain or hungry, that would feel bad. So then we would cry, express the bad feeling. Someone will come along, make changes, and that would um, end up with our needs being met. So that's the first stage of emotional development. The second stage of emotional development, we start to have desires, and we try to use the same process to get our desires met. But because there isn't a naturally occurring bad sensation when there's an unmet desire, we have to create one. So that's the equivalent of us having a genie lamp. So we rub the genie lamp, we self-induce a state of discomfort, we then cry, the genie appears, the genie being the caregiver, they tend to the baby, and then they grant the wish. And at this stage, all of the wishes that the baby has can be granted immediately because they're quite small. They just want to be picked up or put down. So the older the baby comes, the older the child becomes, the genie becomes less reliable because they can't be granted. The child wants to stay out all night or eat whatever. So, but we still rub the lamp to the point where the genie moves out altogether. But we still rub the lamp, which means we get the discomfort, but we don't get our wishes met.
Mm. Well said again. Mr. Byron, why is anxiety the most common issue therapists deal with? Not a clinical answer, the philosophical one. What is anxiety really telling us about modern life that we are refusing to hear?
So, well, I think anxiety is the most common issue that therapists deal with because survival is one of the most important. Keeping ourselves alive is one of the most important jobs that our brains have, and it would rather overprotect than underprotect. So that's what anxiety is. It's an overprotective friend. So once we understand that, we possibly not allow it to dampen our experiences as much as it usually does.
Hmm, certainly. And you specialize in emotions and say they can be changed very easy for much better. That's a
Yeah,
provocative claim.
yeah.
What's an example for emotion most people think? It's just a part of who I am that you've seen someone change radically in a single season.
Yeah.
And of
Okay.
course, that.
let's take anger. Anger,
Mm-hmm.
people describe themselves as just they're angry, so anger is the go-to response. But if we analyze what anger is the emotion you feel when you've told yourself a story that has a theme of injustice. So if you're telling yourself a story of a theme of injustice, then anger is going to be justified. But that same injustice could happen if you told yourself another story, one that does acknowledge the injustice, but one that helps you see that you have agency to do something about the injustice as opposed to just feeling angry. You'll be less likely to feel angry or remain stuck in the anger. Because again, the genie lamp hypothesis makes clear that the anger is you trying to stop that offending behavior with the power of your mind. And of course, that's not going to happen.
The power of your mind. Why do we focus on that one negative thing mindset or thing amidst of the ocean of positive things? What is the evolutionary of psychological mechanisms, and how do we stop it with just thinking positive?
Yeah. So okay. So what you're talking about is called negativity bias, where let's say
Mm-hmm.
10 people give you feedback, 9 people give you good feedback, one person gives you negative
Bad
feedback.
one.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people in that situation they'd ignore the nine or not give it too much sort of ear space, mind space, but they'll focus on the one negative. That's because the nine positive, they're not problems. That one negative, that's a problem. So we are going to seek out the problem and we're going to try and fix it, often in a way that's not going to work, i.e., making ourselves feel bad. So if we were to just analyze, well, what is it about this that I don't like, and what can I practically do to address it? We're much more likely to feel kind of more empowered and do things that can practically make changes.
Make changes. Well, definitely. You work for a local authority for over 2 decades for developing a growth mindset and making a leap. What
Yeah.
kept you stuck for 20 years, and what's the specific crack in the wall that finally let the light in?
So, okay, so when I found the genie lamp hypothesis when I was 20, I wanted to be a therapist then, but because I've got a stutter, I thought, well, I feel like too much of a hypocrite not being able, because I tried to solve the stutter, but I wasn't able to. So I thought I feel like a hypocrite trying to help people with their issues, but I'm unable to treat myself from or resolve my issue. So that's what made me, I guess, hide in office work, office jobs and stuff. But then I developed a growth mindset. I don't know, around year 20 of being in this job. And I realized that I had a general growth mindset, but still a fixed mindset about my job and my speech. So I realized then when a colleague left to become a solicitor, I thought, well, okay, well, that's what's stopping me from leaving. I then remembered that I wanted to be a counselor decades ago. I didn't think I could then because of my speech. I realized that my speech wasn't the big issue I used to think it was. So I thought, to hell with it. I'll I'll do the training and qualify.
Hmm. Well said, Mr. Byron. How can we healthily let go for the past and more fulfilled? Most advise us forgive and forget or just move on. What is your last convenient, more honest answer?
So right. So how can we move on? The best way to move on is to really be honest with yourself about why you are holding on to something. So, and we can use anger again. People find it difficult to let go of anger because they've associated anger with being moral or being motivated. So if they realize that they could let go of the anger and be better motivated, they would let go of it. So the best way to move on is to ask yourself, well, what's preventing me from moving on?
Well said, Mr. Byron. Let it go and move on. What's the biggest problem people face in your clinical and psychological experience? Not anxiety, not depression, but a root problem underneath all symptoms you'd see daily.
I think the biggest problem that people have is realizing that the biggest obstacle is themselves. If they're able to think about themselves in a more helpful, healthy, empathetic, compassionate way, then they would become their best enemy, and they would use that energy to find doing things easier. But because we are our own worst enemy and we feed that then our best ally, we just become stuck in unhealthy thinking patterns or self-defeating behavior.
You believe many issues could be prevented by psychoeducation earlier in life. What's the concept of which you every 14-year-old learned in school, and what would the different about their 30-year-old self they had?
Yes, definitely. I think well the my practice, my counseling practice is quite psychoeducation orientated. So I'm sharing information, and I think the information I'm sharing could have been shared to us when we were like 7 or 8. But because it wasn't, we then grew up not knowing what we are, how to make best use of our resources. So then we grow up to develop issues like anxiety, depression, and we seek therapy to try to resolve those issues. But therapy is only as effective as the skill, experience, receptiveness um, of the client and the counselor. So I'm saying with I think if the school system was different, we wouldn't grow up with these issues because we would have a better sense of what we are and our abilities.
Mm. Well said. Well said, Mr. Byron. You are counseling psychotherapist, mindset coach, NLP practitioner, clinical supervisor, trainer, and hypnotherapist, as well as an author. There's a lot of tools. Which one of you reach first with a new client, and which one you almost never use despite being certified in it?
The one I use less is probably being a hypnotherapist. And
Mm.
the one I use the most, I guess, is being, well, I suppose I use being a philosopher the most because I guess that seeps into all kind of other areas. But career wise, I guess it's therapy. That's the one I spend more hours of the day, of the working day, doing, being a therapist.
Well said. And Mr. Byron, what's something the therapy often gets wrong? A blind spot in the field, the philosophy or coaching fixers, or where do you think coaching goes off and rails without the depth of therapy?
Well, I think okay, so those two questions can be kind of synthesized. I think therapy goes wrong by not acknowledging the real reason why we have bad emotions, and that also applies in coaching as well. If coaches knew that negative emotions are a form of psychological or emotional self harm, that's the first thing they would share with their clients. And so that means that their their clients aren't going to be getting in the way of themselves as much uh, as they would. It's the same with therapy. That's the first thing that therapists should share if the client is in a receptive place to receive it.
Mr. Byron, we relate your work to the entrepreneurship mindset. What does entrepreneurship have to do with therapy? I'm not talking about selling service. I'm talking about internal posture of an entrepreneur. How is the therapeutic stance?
Well, I guess we just have to have a kind of business mind, I guess, because yeah, we do have to sell ourselves, but we do have to kind of manage our working day as if it is a business. And surely being an entrepreneur means that you are going to be doing things differently, ideally. So that will hopefully help you stand out amongst other therapists and other coaches.
Indeed. And what's a belief about growth mindset that Carol Dweck got right? And what's something she missed that you had to discover through your own starter and career transition?
Oh, okay. So, well, I think what she got right was there is no downside to having a growth mindset. I
Mm.
think that's definitely something that she promoted, um, and Okay, and apologies if I'm kind of getting this wrong because I don't know too much about Carol Dweck as a person, but I don't think I've read anything that implied she thought that everyone was born with the growth mindset. Apologies if that's not the case, but I think that's the case. I think we are all born with the growth mindset, but we learn to not do it because of the negative consequences of doing it, like being too loud or being too creative and then being criticized for it. So we then say, "Oh, well, I can't do that anymore." So then we morph into having a fixed mindset because that's a safer place to be. Less criticism, less judgment.
A fixed mindset, indeed. And to wrap up our discussion for today, Mr. Byron, you help people resolve issues and achieve goals. What is the goal you've seen someone to achieve that looked like success on the other side or the outside, but it was actually a disaster internally? And how do you screen for that before helping someone climb the wrong ladder?
Hmm. Yeah, I'm not sure I can identify any disasters that my clients have, but let's just say maybe they've done things that haven't worked out as well as they could. So let's say you're working with a client, it seems to be going well, but then you might have missed something. So let's say someone is working with anxiety. And so you do some anxiety work with them. They seem to be okay anxiety wise. So then you move on to something else. But then they say something that makes it clear that you could have just worked on the anxiety more because it's still there lurking in the background.
Yes, lurking in the background. So, Mr. Byron, can you please invite our listeners to support your business, your projects, your book, or anything you want to promote Entrepreneurship 101?
Oh, well, yeah, please do. Please just check out my website. There's my contact information there. So reach out to me with any questions or anything. Feel free to get a copy of my book, Find Your Path to Resilience, from Amazon or bookshop.org. I do have a LinkedIn profile as well, but I'm not really that avid a LinkedIn user, to be honest.
Well said, Mr. Byron. And I have one more last question before I will let you go. If a listener right now feels stuck, not in a crisis, just heavy, directionless, going
Mm,
through emotions, and they tried therapy, tried coaching, tried working on themselves. What is the
mhm.
question you ask them that no one else has asked?
Maybe something to do with self-compassion. Like, are there any downsides to self-compassion? The person will probably say yes, they've tried it, whatever. So I'll try to get them thinking in a way that helps them see that self-compassion should be like a worthwhile pursuit or ongoing goal. Yeah, self-compassion.
Self compassion and data. So, Mr. Byron Athene, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Body can people see you soon? And looking forward for our episode on Book 101 review, Mr. Byron. And let's talk about the writing process of your book.